Great. So I'm Chad Wood. I'm on the committee for inclusive education with ECIS, and I've got the pleasure of introducing Jessica to everybody. We met a couple months ago, and Jessica works with other schools, and something that she really brings to the table is she's also a parent of a child that has needs. And so we really got into conversation about how school and behavior and self-regulation has really changed after COVID. And so this is kind of a really great time for us to kind of dive into that, understand a little bit more about how the brain works. And so thank you, Jessica, for being here with us today and giving us your time. And I'm happy and looking forward to what you're going to present to us today.
Thanks, Chad. I'm thrilled to be here with you all. I want to tell you, it is the pre-dawn hour where I live. So the sun has not come out. We have some interesting lighting. And I may be drinking my coffee, but I know you don't mind. And I know I see some friends popping in. It's great to see you all. And we have a lot of people signed up. I think most people will be joining us asynchronously, which is the beauty of how we can do things these days. So I am going to talk about regulation before education. This is something, I don't know about you all, but I was not taught this in teacher ed. I was not taught regulation skills. I was not taught how my brain works. I was not taught how to help children who are in the throes of a tantrum. So I'm going to share with you a skill set that I have been learning, as Chad said, because I have a child with regulation needs. However, I work in schools and my team works in schools around the globe, and we see children everywhere we go with these same needs. And what that tells me is that the paradigm has really shifted. The paradigm around classroom management, the paradigm around behavior expectations, the paradigm around special education and learning inclusion. And I know we have a lot of learning inclusion folks on this webinar. My dream is that something like this is not just in the inclusion special interest group, it's for everyone, right? It's for the general ed teachers at your schools. But this is a great place to start, and feel free to take any of this back to your campuses if you find it helpful. So my business is based in our HQ, our headquarters are in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we're called Northshore Coaching and Consulting. And at Northshore, we believe that educators, that you all who work in schools are heroes. You are absolute heroes. You impact our children's lives every day. And we, as a team, support educators around the world by providing really personalized professional development opportunities. So our most popular offerings are one-on-one coaching, where we come in and we watch and we see a specific context and we can help based on your context, and also really personalized professional development experiences for your school community, because we have schools on with us today from 5 continents at least. All your schools are different. All your classrooms are different. We know that. And so we just seek to support you for what your unique needs are. Currently, we are being asked most about student behavior support around student behaviors. And this is interesting because I know a lot of schools that we work with here in the States, that we work with internationally, they haven't typically had student behaviors as on their radar. There just weren't a lot of big student behaviors. But what's happened, and there are a lot of reasons, COVID being one of them. I don't want to say we're in a post-pandemic world, because we absolutely aren't, but hopefully we're in something that's resembling post-pandemic schooling at this point. But we're seeing, when our children are back, we're seeing the impact of the last couple of years. Teacher well-being plays into this, because teachers, oh my gosh, you all have worked so hard for the last 2.5 years. This year was supposed to feel easier, and I'm hearing that in a lot of ways it's actually harder. And so if you're on, like I said, we have a lot of people signed up, not as many who will be here synchronously, but if you have anything to share or add to, please post it in the comments, because you're not alone. If you're seeing new behaviors at your schools, if you're seeing tired teachers, if you're seeing teachers who aren't sure they have the skill set to deal with what's in front of them, you aren't alone. This is me. You heard a little bit about me from Chad. Let's see. My business, Northshore Coaching and Consulting. It's a dream. Basically, it's dream work. I get to work with teachers all over the world. I'm a former elementary school teacher. I also taught middle school, and I had a stint in pre-kindergarten. And I taught all over. I taught in the US, South America, Europe, Africa. I was an international school teacher in Warsaw, Poland. I'm also a professor of education. I've been teaching classroom management for the last 10 years, and I feel that the entire course needs to be scrapped and reworked because the brains of our children have changed and the brains of us adults have changed. But I do have a very large background in classroom management, and I teach that through the University of St. Scholastica and the University of Notre Dame here in the States. But most importantly, on my journey as an educator, as a consultant, is my journey through this as a mother. So I have a second grader, Gray, you will see at this picture, and a fifth grader, Lucy, and they are why I do what I do, and they are why I spread the word. My second grader was diagnosed with a regulation disorder, which is even a very new diagnosis. It's new since 2013. And he was diagnosed a few months ago as a 7-year-old, but he's been presenting for the last 4 years with really extreme behaviors. So we're talking tantrums, we're talking occasional violence. It's almost like we would see him as a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old. It's almost like he gets into this space where he's so upset, his brain shuts off. That's how I've always described it. It's like his brain shuts off. And now I'm going to explain the science behind why his brain pretty much is shutting off. This is what happens. So that's my second grader, and he's unique in that he has a diagnosis. Most of the kids we see in the schools we work in do not. Some of it is, like I said, this is really new diagnoses anyway. But you're dealing with a lot of different things. You're dealing with culture, you're dealing with the country you're in, you're dealing with availability of services. It is highly likely most of your students who present like my son will not get an official diagnosis. However, I'm going to share with you a skill set you can use to help kids like Gray, but really to help everybody, including yourself. Because what we've learned as parents is that when he's presenting these really extreme behaviors, what happens to us? We feel really extreme. And so part of our journey in this is just learning how to regulate ourselves. And that includes learning how to help our 5th grade daughter regulate as well. Now, she's seen her own mental health issues after the pandemic. And this is important to know because Lucy, my daughter, is not a child who is on her teacher's radars as having mental health issues. She is happy. She loves school. She's a teacher's pet, always. She also has severe anxiety, and that started in July of 2020. And so we always tell her teachers this because she is not one who would be on your radar for mental health issues. But I think this is so important to know because there are a lot of Lucys out there right now. There are a lot of those kids who are flying under the radar, going through their own mental health issues that you don't necessarily think that they're experiencing. And so we have the spectrum in our house. We have the child with the diagnosis and we have the child who kind of sails through school, but they both are struggling. So our objectives for today, I'm going to talk about trauma and how this trauma, the stresses that our students live through and that we live through influence student regulation and our own regulation. And I'm going to share with you strategies to help you foster self-awareness, which is the first part to being able to regulate. You have to be self-aware of what's happening. And then emotional regulation with your students. We're going to focus more on self-awareness today because I think it's just the cornerstone for being able to move into self-regulation. If you can't name what's happening with you, if you can't identify that you're feeling triggered, it's really hard to regulate. So back in teacher education, we were all taught Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We remember this pretty pyramid, don't we? And we were taught to ask the probing questions, and we were taught at the top, self-actualization, esteem. What we have found in the last 2.5 years is a lot of us and a lot of our students are down at the bottom of that pyramid. We're down where they're not feeling physiologically safe, not knowing about our own health, not knowing about the health of our families. And so many of you have families who live abroad and your students' families live abroad. It's a big weight to have on us worrying about our health and our family's health for 2.5 years. And that's not over, because before I got on this webinar, I gave my daughter a COVID test because we're still here. So this hasn't gone away. And on top of that, we have a lot going on in the world. We have a war. We have a global recession. We have just the normal traumatic events happening. And if you don't believe me, you just turn on the news. You'll see people in various states of dysregulation doing crazy things because there's just a lot happening. So those are the things we know about, but the things you don't know about are the things that are going on in each individual student's home. And so I paint this picture so you just can see there's just a lot happening. There's a lot happening. And I think the most important thing is for us to give ourselves grace to say, oh, you know, we're working in this paradigm right now where there is a lot going on. Okay, this is not normal times. Many of your schools have some kind of framework for social emotional learning, and typically they follow the CASEL's competencies of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. I like CASEL. I think these are nice and neat and clean. And depending on the training, you'll learn, and there's lots of research on how these skills really help performance. They increase student academic achievement. They help leaders. I was trained in CASEL through Google, through their Neuroscience Institute for Leadership. But today I'm talking about well-being, and I'm talking about why these skills are important and relevant to help us show up every day to school and to help us feel well enough to help our students when they present with something that is surprising or challenging. Okay, so again, today is really about developing self-awareness, which is the #1 strategy. And then we move to self-management. So I'm also going to share some self-management, self-regulation skills, but really today is focused on starting the conversation around self-awareness. I'm going to give you a really quick neuroscience lesson. And the way we work in Northshore is we always like to tell you the why behind what you're seeing. In this case, it's neuroscience. It's what's happening in the brain. And so bear with me as I explain, because I think this is important to know so that when you see a student or you see an adult in your building presenting with a behavior that seems really extreme, a lot of times our first thought is defensiveness, or we feel personally offended. We're like, that kid is just out to make my day miserable. It's highly unlikely, but I will tell you what's happening in that child or adult's brain. And I like this because it's really simple, and I share it with my kids. I share it with educators. It's just a simple way to think about your brain. So if your brain is your fist and your amygdala is your thumb, and the amygdala is the part of our brain that triggers us into fight or flight or freeze. So our amygdala fires when a perceived threat is happening. So the amygdala is really important in the brain because it's what's kept the human species alive. The amygdala is what tells you when you're driving down the highway and somebody cuts you off. The amygdala fires up, cortisol floods your body, and you're able to act and swerve into the other lane. Okay, so the amygdala is very helpful. The cortisol, that hormone that enters your body, is what propels you into action or inaction. Also helpful. However, there's a part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, the wise leader, helps regulate your amygdala. It's the part of the brain that tells your amygdala when you're driving the car, nope, it's not an emergency. The car merging into your lane is like 10 cars ahead. So your amygdala fires up, your prefrontal cortex says, you're okay. Cortisol leaves, you keep driving. Not everybody has the same prefrontal cortex ability as everyone else. It is a muscle you can grow, but we're all in different places of where we are with it. Okay, so some people, and you know these people, maybe you're often in this state, some people are really easily triggered. For example, as a teacher, it would be an email. The email can trigger the amygdala. You see an email from a parent, see an email from an administrator, your amygdala fires up, and and you get triggered, cortisol floods your body, and what do? You either hit open or or you close your laptop, right? And that's your prefrontal cortex saying, you know what, you don't need to handle that email right now. Or your amygdala has overrode your prefrontal cortex and is saying, well, I'm going to reply to that email. Okay, so this is the brain. And it's, as I said, it's important to have, the amygdala is an important part of the brain. It keeps us safe. It protects us from danger. But the thing about the amygdala, which I think is fascinating when it comes to neuroscience, is that in the last thousands of years of all the evolution that has happened in our bodies, the amygdala has not changed. It has not evolved. So it's sensing the same threats it was sensing back in prehistoric times. And the threats are not the saber-toothed tiger in the bushes outside of our cave. The threats can be the parent at the door. It can be weather. It can be somebody else's mood. All of those things can trigger our amygdalas and can send cortisol into our bodies, okay? That is what the trigger does. And then your ability to regulate depends on the ability of your prefrontal cortex, and everybody is different. Lots of science out there supporting these practices, but you can see, I think, just by my short explanation, how when you are in a state of, when you're in a triggered state, it's really hard to learn. It's hard to learn, it's hard to retain. It's hard to be emotionally regulated. So these practices, especially self-awareness, help increase your ability to pay attention, to retain information, to have relationships, and they decrease cortisol. So like I said, cortisol is really important as a hormone that propels your body into action, but it's not meant to be in your body long-term. And so in the last couple of years, back in, depending on where you are in the world, for us here in Minnesota, it was March of 2020. A lot of us have been in a highly activated state for over 2.5 years, and that's not healthy. Cortisol is not meant to live in your body long-term. Here's one other way to think about it, and this comes from mental health. So our mental health professionals on the webinar, this might be familiar. Another way to think about it is that everybody has this window of tolerance. Okay, the idea is you want to stay within your window of tolerance. So things activate you, but they don't necessarily set you off too much, and then you regulate and you're back where you started. However, everybody's window of tolerance is different. And we just think of the people in your lives. Think of the people who you would consider having really high tolerance. Think of the teachers in your building. Think of people in your family, and others who have really low tolerance. It's because everybody has a different level. They all are at a different starting place with the window of tolerance. So I like this just as another explanation for the way our brains work. What happens with your window of tolerance, and this is when your amygdala gets triggered, when your amygdala gets triggered and it propels you outside of your window, it looks like two different things. Either over-functioning, and this is like what would happen with my son when he was triggered in school. And it can be anything that triggered this child. It can be anything. He would get anxious, angry, out of control, overwhelmed. He was like fighting or flighting. I'm embarrassed to say he was a runner. He ran from school 2 times. Sad. It was really sad. This is his body. He's outside the window of tolerance. This is what happens. But the interesting part is that the other way people react is by the underfunctioning, zoned out, numb, frozen. Your body wants to shut down. You're sleeping a lot, lethargy. I hear from educators everywhere, but especially middle school and high school, I'm hearing the kids are just really tired and they're really unmotivated to learn. This would put them in the under-functioning part. So like the window of tolerance, you can also, it's part of the prefrontal cortex. It's part of a muscle you can train to help stay in that window. And that's what we want. We're looking for regulation. Regulation is you're right there in your window of tolerance. But how many of us have ever thought about this before? Probably not many. Probably not many. And so as we go through our days and we think about how we move through our days and watching our students move through our days, and if you're an administrator watching the people in your building move through their days, you can kind of gauge where people are at. A lot of times as a consultant, I can feel school culture and energy just from being in the building. Like right away, I can feel it. And so you'll just start to notice where you think people are within their window of tolerance. But most importantly, notice where you are, okay? Because all of this regulation is extremely important information, but we need to be able to do the same thing as we want to help our students do. So what does this mean for you? All this neuroscience, increasing your ability to handle challenging situations. These are not going to decrease in the coming years. Everything is getting harder. Everything is getting harder. Like I said, the paradigm has changed. What does this mean for you? Decrease in stress and burnout. People who are able to identify when they need something before they hit the window of tolerance. That's our goal here. We want to self-identify personally and help our students before they're outside the window, before the amygdala is triggered. And this really helps us with our stress levels. This helps decrease burnout in schools. It helps increase resilience. And I put modeling leadership here because I just think it's so important as the adults in the building or the adults in the room. Let's say we have a child who's escalated. Our immediate response, and this is, again, like we're usually triggered by somebody else being triggered. Our innate response is to escalate as well. But we need to model for our students or for our families or for our staff. We need to model these SEL skills. We need to model self-awareness. I can't tell my son when he's in the middle of a tantrum, I can't start yelling at him and expect anything to change, because then we're both heightened. Okay, so as the parent or as the teacher, I need to be able to model what I see, and calm is contagious. Calm is contagious. So if you're able to self-regulate before you get triggered, before you're outside your window, it can really help bring your students in. And trauma makes this even harder. I'm going to talk about trauma a little bit at the end. Trauma and stress, it has us in survival mode. Many of you have probably felt like you've been in survival mode for the past 2.5 years. Fight, flight, or freeze. This is the way our body responds to stress. And we're being impacted, as I said, in lots of ways. And as I could go through this list, and usually in person, I will go through this list and I'll ask people to identify, like raise your hand if your sleep has been impacted or your appetite. And we have a lot of hands up for a lot of this list. And this is the same for your students. They are having these same reactions. Attention seeking at the end is my nice way of saying like that. I've seen a lot of classroom management issues. I've seen a lot of behavioral issues, but then some of them you can see low energy, lack of focus. That would put you on the other side of the window of tolerance. Okay, so it's really just people reacting very differently to stress. Okay, here's the part where we talk about what you can do. But like I said, I find it really important to share the why behind what's going on, so you can understand what's happening in the brain. It can help you move forward into how you want to handle the situations. And today we're focusing on activities you can use with your students, but really I want you to leave thinking, how can I use these for myself? Yesterday I was so clever, I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself. I would love to have my son have the ability to regulate more often. I would love to not have a husband upset and a son dysregulated. These are things I would really love. But what can I control? I can only control myself. So this is really about thinking, well, what can I do? How can I walk into school tomorrow or after this webinar? And what can I do to model these same practices? And again, we start with self-awareness because it's the first step into self-management. You have to know what's going on. You have to be in a space of awareness before you can change your behavior. Here are some ideas. And it's important to recognize, just think about your own triggers as well. In a full day workshop, we would really dig into your own triggers. A lot of people don't know. And what events or situations pop up that narrow your window of tolerance? So when I was an international school teacher in Warsaw, Poland, my window of tolerance, this is a true story. If I knew I had to go to the post office that afternoon, the Polish post office, oh my gosh, it was going to add like 2 hours onto my day. So if I knew I had to go to the post office, my window of tolerance for the day was already shorter. Okay. And that's something I was aware of. I'd be on the bus on the way to school thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get home till 7. So important to consider, and maybe even write them down as they happen. What are events or situations that narrow your own window of tolerance? And some of them are going to be big and obvious, like the children having a tantrum, or the children not being able to sit on the carpet during morning meeting. And others are going to be different. You know, it could be having a colleague show up in a bad mood, or knowing parent-teacher conferences are coming. Really, the way we're starting to think about classroom management and behaviors is starting with self-awareness. And these are 2 sheets that are from my son's school. And everywhere I go, I take pictures, and I share out pictures all the time. So the think sheet is, this is what the students get when they displayed a behavior. And the very first thing is describe, circle how you were feeling. It's really asking kids to intentionally think about how they're feeling. Circle how you were feeling, and then what you chose to do. I think this is really interesting. And then the second one is a self-reflection that they gave us during conferences. And I love it. I love how self-reflection and self-awareness is just embedded in their work now. What's it like during morning meeting? And notice this is my son, he colored in the middle rainbow. So as a teacher, if this is information I have in advance, if I know this, if I know, okay, gray's kind of so-so in morning meeting, it's good data. I actually think this, I know my son, and he would put a sad face smiley guy next to phonics. Phonics is his least favorite time of the day. And as a teacher, I would know that, all right, during phonics, Gray's window of tolerance is smaller. What can I do? How can I be proactive so that he doesn't fall outside the window and have a behavior? I also want to give, this is my son in the middle, bless his heart, sweet angel, trying to get our attention. And these, somebody's asking, could this be used for high school students? 100%. This can be used for high school students. I'm going to give you some specific examples, but everything I share, you can adapt to your context. Absolutely, high school students. High school students are interesting too. And I think when we talk about trauma, we're offering a trauma-informed practices webinar. We really talk specifically about the needs of high school students, because what I see in the high school students I know is they really tend to fall on the bottom of the window of tolerance with the zoned out kind of lethargy. But anyway, I want to give you an example. So this is a school, these are 2 teachers in a local school here that I work with, a great school. The students at this school, they've had a traumatic couple of years. One of the stressful events being they've had very, very high teacher turnover in the last 2 years. So that is a stressful event that can be challenging for students. They had the 2nd grade teacher, Laura, who's in this picture. She is their first teacher they've had, this group, more than 6 weeks. So these kids walked into 2nd grade and already they've been through a lot. They don't, you know, they're down at Maslow's bottom of the pyramid. How can I trust you? Are you going to stay? And she has a lot of work to do to get them caught up, just to feel safe before they can even learn. Because if you don't feel safe, or if you're dysregulated, it's really hard to learn. Okay, on the other side, I have Connor, who also has a hard class. He has a tough group of 6th graders who have been through a lot. What's interesting about these 2 teachers, and I work with both of them very closely, their window of tolerance is much different. Connor's has got to be huge. This man, he is the most calm and controlled person I think I've ever worked with. He inspires me. And when talking with him about this, it turns out he's a former Navy SEAL. And calm is contagious is something part of the Navy SEAL. It's part of what they do. And he said, yeah, I'm used to being as calm and regulated as possible. So he's former military, now teacher. He handles this group, and this group matches his energy. So this would be, and they are, because I watch them and they're specialists. This is a high energy group, but with him, they really match energy. Laura has had more struggles, and Laura's window of tolerance is a lot shorter. And I have permission from both of these teachers to use their stories. And so with Laura, I've been focusing a lot because she's got 9 kids. She's a really small class, and about 4 of them are presenting like my son. So Laura, she already has a small window of tolerance, which she's completely aware of. So right now we're trying to grow that. We're trying to increase that muscle. We're trying to help her keep herself in a space where the kids can be doing things like you see in this picture. They could be trying to take her off track, but she stays within her window and stays calm. It's a lot harder than it sounds, right? This is a lot harder than it sounds, but this is a tale of 2 teachers with 2 high needs classes, and just how much of a difference it makes the way you're regulated and regulating yourself as an adult. All right, so let's get started with some ideas, and this is a great high school idea. Start out your day, start out your period, your class period, with a quick social, emotional self-awareness check-in. You go around the room, name an emotion you're bringing into class with you today. I think this is especially important for middle and high school students because they have different emotions from class to class, right? You don't know what happens in the hallway between classes. And so it's really important to help you take the temperature of the room to know, what are you bringing in with you? Where am I starting? Because if I know as a teacher, if I'm starting with with a group who's already highly triggered, they're gonna have a really hard time learning. So maybe I need to focus efforts in a different space or change the way I was about to present this lesson. Name an emotion you're bringing into class with you today. It's a really simple one. However, because of some very interesting research done by Dr. Brene Brown, and she has studied emotions, she found that people primarily can only self-identify 3 emotions. So of the many emotions you see on this wheel, if you were to walk into your class and ask, people can mostly identify 3. If you want to take a guess at what they are, put it in the chat. 3 emotions. So really just teaching emotions, teaching the words to name is brand new. And we can't assume that people have this emotional vocabulary. The 3 words, nobody wanted to take a guess, but I bet, oh, somebody did. Here we go. Happy, sad, angry. Yes. Those are the 3 emotions. This is children, this is adults. Those are the 3 emotions they have. For my child, it's mostly happy or angry. Sad falls into angry. Okay, so just getting a vocabulary around emotions is a really helpful place to start. I work with teachers who have versions of this emotion wheel in their class visible. Okay, so students actually had the ability to see and name the emotion. And then I have the other pictures, a whole bunch of colored cards. This is an activity I've started using in my workshops. I went to the hardware store and I got a bunch of paint samples, and I bring all these colors, and a lot of times we'll start our workshop. I'll be like, go grab the color that's speaking to how you're feeling right now. And I like the color association because for those of us who only have 3 words, it's easier to associate with the color. And so I found actually this has been a huge hit. This has been a huge hit in just helping adults self-identify. And all I did was, like I said, I walked into the hardware store, I got color samples, I bring them over everywhere I go now. So here are things you can do. You can do them tomorrow. Also great to use in staff meetings. Again, helping adults, helping us find this language around emotion so that we can find, so we can name what we're feeling, so we can then be able to self-regulate. In line with this is called, and I'm going to put it in the chat, it's called zones of regulation. So zones of regulation was actually, coincidentally, it was created by somebody here in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And it takes that color wheel and it puts it into 3 colors. So you start, you're either green, you're yellow, I'm sorry, 4 colors, you're blue or you're red. And kids, all ages, I've seen this used in middle school. You can use this with all ages. They identify, they walk, they do it during morning meeting, they do it after lunch. They take a quick temp in the middle of class. Raise your hand if you're feeling green, yellow, blue, red. Green is good to go. Yellow is on the verge, like you're about to like pop out of your window of tolerance. Blue is I'm tired. Blue is actually how a lot of teachers I work with identify kids who are ill, because they fall into that tired range and they say, come here, let me feel your forehead. Okay, maybe you should go to the office. And then red is when, red is like you're outside the window, you're triggered and you're gonna need time to come back down. Your brain at this point is not ready to learn. You're not ready to socialize. You're not ready to have a rational conversation. We learned the zones of regulation. It's very common here. It's used in many, many preschools, which is great because I think preschool is where we need to start, but I'm seeing it trickle up into all the grades. And I work in many schools here in the States where I'll see these zones posted on the walls. It becomes common language in the school. Just really simple identifying for basic self-awareness. We use it in our family as well. Here's another one, the Zones Toolbox. These are all free. You can get these materials for free. I'm like, all these programs I'm going to share, I'm just sharing my favorite parts. I don't recommend going and investing in any of them necessarily, but I'm showing you my favorite parts so you can see what you might want to try for your context. This is, again, here's that think sheet. This is from a school I was in last week. I took a picture. This was on the wall in the hallway, zones break. And it helps, again, this is a school where the kids are familiar with identifying in the zones of regulation. This is a K-5 school. But not only does it give them the opportunity to self-identify, you'll see they're embedded in this are some ways to help regulate. Okay, the meme check-in. This is for kids or adults. Again, we're growing our vocabulary around emotion. And sometimes it's hard in the moment to know how you're feeling. Like, name an emotion you're bringing into class. I'm not sure. But if I put this meme on the board and people see these adorable animals and I say, all right, let's figure out which animal we're relating to right now. It can give us a lot of information as educators. And it's also kind of cute and fun. And it's all open to interpretation. So, for example, I will give you an example. I use this with a group, a large group of teachers in August of 2020. So, like, first days back, the schools were going to open, kind of, sort of, hybrid. The teachers nobody knew what to expect. You all remember this. And so I did this meme check-in, and the majority of the group raised their hand for number 5. And I was like, oh, interesting. That must be good. Like, that's the dog catching the Frisbee in its mouth, right? And they were like, no, that dog is getting hit in the face with the Frisbee. So I thought that was hilarious and I learned a lesson, but it also goes to show these are all open to interpretation. Also kind of fun. My personal favorite though is the Chihuahua check-in. If anybody would like my memes, I will give you my email at the end and I will share my memes with you. You can't resist the Chihuahua check-in. We are the proud parents to an elderly Chihuahua who often looks like Chihuahua number 5. The Chihuahua check-in we have on our fridge, and we do this check-in as a family. So again, sometimes it's hard to know when you walk in the door after a big day, like, which emotion am I feeling? My daughter can do it. My daughter's emotional vocabulary is like off the charts. But for the rest of us, sometimes we need to be like, I think I'm Chihuahua number 2 right now. Just lots of ideas. Like I said, we're all about giving you lots of ideas, and you take what you want and contextualize it. This is from a middle school. The middle school teacher, middle school gym, actually. So for those of you who work with specialists or are specialists thinking, well, how in the world do I do this in my specialist class? Here's an idea. She had her middle school students, she had colored paper pre-cut at the front of the room for her students to pick up as they walked into gym. And then she would watch them pick up a color and drop it into a basket. And the colors corresponded to an emotion. Again, it's this idea, this zones of regulation, this color and emotion. And she would watch them drop it into the basket. And then she said, well, now I know how we're starting. And she said, I also know if we get any certain colors, that those are kids I need to check in with. Those are kids I need to check in with. And then after, in her office, she had these large kind of mosaics displayed. And I said, oh, are those from your color feeling check-in? She said, yep. And I like to put them up to normalize feelings. I like the students who come in here to see, just because I'm blue, I'm not the only one who's ever felt this way. She's like, it is a good reminder, especially for those middle school kids, to normalize everybody's in a different spot every day. I thought that was brilliant. The last one is from a trauma-informed schools curriculum that my children's district uses. Now, I don't love every part of this curriculum, but I do love the worry check-in. And again, it's the color association. Yellow is no worries, orange, some worries, blue, a lot of worries, because at the bottom, worries make it hard to learn. And so this is what the students did every single day as part of their morning routine. And their teacher, Mr. Allen, also had a clip that he would put up. And people ask, well, do you recommend having names on clips? Do the students feel shame moving their clip around? And so I've posed this question back to teachers I work with, and they say, you know, at the first day or two, it's novel and people are kind of like taking notice. And they said after that, it's just such a part of the routine, and you've already normalized emotions in different states of self-awareness that the kids don't care anymore. So I don't know, you can try this out with names, without, with numbers, with students identifying with animals. I've seen lots of things, but I do like this. I like the worry check-in, and just, it reminds us at the bottom, worries make it hard to learn. I'm talking really quickly. It's because usually in our workshops, they're very interactive. We're in breakout groups, we're doing activities. But because I knew so many of you would be logging in asynchronously, I'm just trying to go ahead with the information so you have lots of ideas. A self-management, self-regulation idea. Okay, so this is moving from self-awareness into helping us, students and ourselves, with regulation and self-management. Here are some ideas. The first idea is one that I don't ever see used often enough, and that is the brain break. Why? Because giving your brain a break, actually, the data is really interesting. It actually stays highly active. These brain breaks increase productivity and creativity. They decrease disruptive behaviors because they give your brain a chance to do this or to go back into the window. And it helps with learning retention, because it's really hard to learn and retain when we're outside of our window. So brain breaks scattered throughout your day. If you're a teacher, if you are an administrator, please give them to yourself. A brain break could be anything that is not the work that is in front of you. So anything physical. Sometimes I tell teachers and they say, oh, you know, I only have 2 minutes and I need a brain break. I have 2 minutes between when I have to go get the kids at music and we talk about, well, what can you do? Well, I can step outside and breathe fresh air for 2 minutes. Great. I can walk up and down the stairs. Great. I could go say hi to a colleague. These are all brain breaks, okay? For kids, brain breaks are there, and I'm going to give you some examples. It can be anything that gives their brain a break from whatever the teaching and the content is. It could be a partner talk. Okay, it could be away from listening to me talk with a partner. It could be moving somewhere around the room. It could be doing an actual activity, and I'm going to show you some ideas. Anything that gives your brain a break. They used to say, and this data is about 10 years old, that for every 8 minutes of instruction that a person is receiving, direct instruction, students, adults, for every 8 minutes, they need 2 minutes to help the instructions sink in, and they need to have that break from just being a passive listener. And most of you work in schools where there's just probably a lot of great teaching going on. But whatever the activity is, it's interesting to know that the brain, after 8 minutes, it needs to do something else. I would posit that because this data is old and because of what's happened with technology and with pandemic hybrid teaching, et cetera, that this is more like 5 minutes. And for young children, 3 minutes. So 3 minutes of learning, instruction, being passive, to 2 minutes of being active and engaged. And so this rule, I share it with teachers when we're talking about instruction. And I just remind them that even the way you were instructing 2.5 years ago, we have different brains now. Okay, so here's some ideas. I love physical activity because it's good. It's good to, like, especially shake out stress, like physically let go of stress. It's the number one thing that helps my son. He has a lot of proactive brain breaks in his day, embedded in his day, in times where they know his window of tolerance is smaller. Brain's asking for a break, and look around, like read the room, you'll see it. Physical restlessness, wandering attention, irritability. The idea is to give the brains a break before you see these things. If you've seen them, you've often lost your window. It's not too late, but you want to try and do a brain break before you start seeing this. Or a sensory break. Okay, it could also just be touching. Actually, when I was waiting for the webinar to start, I was coloring in my adult coloring book, kind of my own nice way of self-regulating. Art, drawing, movement, nature, air, these are all really great brain breaks or sensory breaks. The child shouldn't have to earn the break. Okay, the day they need the break the most is the day they're least likely to earn them. I know this 1,000 times over because of my own child. If he had to earn his sensory breaks and his brain breaks, he probably couldn't be in a traditional classroom. Like he would need something else. But they are so good at this proactive approach to giving him breaks and giving all the children breaks that it really helps him regulate throughout the day. But we need this too, right? We need this too. And so if you are feeling heightened, or you're feeling like you're falling outside your window of tolerance and your students are off to a specialist, or you have 5 minutes to yourself, give yourself the break. Don't open your email. Do something good for you so that you can help regulate yourself and you can be ready for whatever is next, the parent meeting, the next class, etc. What do they look like? Again, tons out there on the internet that's totally free that you can find for both elementary and high school. They can be the same, they can be different. I invite you to just look around and see what you like. And one of the consultants in my practice shared with me that a school she works in here in Texas uses Pure Edge, which is an SEL curriculum, and within it are brain breaks, and it's totally free. It's totally free curriculum. So, and they do brain breaks by age and grade. So Pure Edge, worth looking into. I know there are a lot of SEL curriculums out there. Many of them are really good. But again, don't be afraid to pull in pieces. There's a lot of good stuff out there. And that's one of the beautiful things about consulting in dozens of schools. We are exposed to a lot of good practice, a lot of good curriculum that you don't necessarily know about if it's not what's happening in your own school. So we like to share all of our favorite things. I wanted to share, this is our most recent offering. We're going to offer a 2-hour webinar series specifically on trauma-informed practices for international school educators. This is Jody. She is a good friend of mine. She is a therapist, and her family, her husband's in the Foreign Service. They have been posted around the world. She has teenager, middle schooler, and an elementary school child. She knows what it's like to raise kids who are living between worlds, and she has just some great advice for helping teachers and kind of know what to look for. Know how to understand some of the needs of their families. Like I said, there are kids out there like Lucy who, because they're not presenting the big behaviors, they think, well, everything must be fine. But now we know that that's not necessarily true. So if you're interested in having Jody give a webinar specifically for your school, and she'll contextualize it to whatever your school population, to what your needs are, just send me an email. I'm so excited about this offering. Because I've worked in international schools as well. You all have a really unique context, and you're all just being an international school educator is a unique context, being away from where you grew up, dealing with things like the post office in the foreign country, and your students as well. Just a little bit more about our expertise. You can learn more about us at our website. You can contact me anytime. I just love talking and hearing about what your needs are. Everything we do is personalized. So yeah, I would love to hear what's going on at your schools. What are you seeing? What are you anticipating? And like I said, if you're on here right now, it's probably to get ahead. It's to get ahead of the curve. It's to learn how to work in this new paradigm. And that's amazing. So your school communities are lucky to have you. I would love to know, for those of you who are with me in real time, what are you taking away from our time together today? Just put it in the chat. What are you leaving with? This is our exit ticket. I threw a lot of information at you. A lot of information. Your brain is probably on overload. The nice thing about the webinar is that you can come back to it and you can pause it. You can pause it where you want to, maybe take notes and reflect. But yeah, absolutely. Feel free to use the content, contextualize it for your school or for your class, and just know how you all don't hear it enough. What you do is so meaningful and it's so appreciated. And I say that as a parent. So I say that as an educator. Oh, great. Thanks. Thanks for those who are participating. Flipped brain, window of tolerance, calm is contagious, window of tolerance. I know, I really like the window of tolerance. And that's something you can even, a lot of these you can actually print out, put up on your wall just for our own reminders. Teachers, yeah, just keeping in mind too, this is a good point. If, depending on when meetings are scheduled, just keeping in mind your teachers' window of tolerance. I have an example of this. So I gave a keynote a few weeks ago. It was a keynote to a conference here. And my keynote was at 1:30, which is kind of late for a keynote, but okay. But right before my keynote, this group, the entire conference, had sat through the business, the minutes. They went through the minutes. They did kind of the whole board meeting for this entire group at the conference. And so by the time I stood up at the podium to give my keynote, this poor group they had had lunch, they had sat through the board meeting. The first thing I did, I said, we're going to take a brain break. Everybody take 5 minutes. Everybody take 5 minutes. Reading the room, knowing what people need, especially after a long day or a lot of information. This is me. Please say hi. Feel free to join. If you go to our website, I can put you on our newsletter list. I give out tips all the time. tips on regulation, tips on classroom management, tips on well-being. Thank you for all you do. And yeah, just be in touch if there's anything you need. Take care of yourselves though. Take care of yourselves first. Put on your oxygen masks first. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. I think, I don't know everybody here that's in attendance, but I can definitely say I learned something new. It was a great way. You presented a lot of things in new visuals, gave us a lot to think about and take forward. This it was recorded and it'll be added onto the ECIS website. So it'll be posted on YouTube so people can go back and review it and look at it in their own time. But thank you. I think we've got your information. So if people wanted to reach out, they could. But thank you again, Jessica.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
I'll just bounce in as well and do a quick plug for the Inclusive Education Conference, which is coming up next March. And call for proposals is open in case any of you want to propose something for that, a presentation or a workshop for that. And we look forward to seeing you as guests there too. Lovely to see so many people here today. Thank you. And thanks to the Inclusive Education SIG for organising this. Jessica, thank you very, very much. It was a really informative session and I'm very supportive of our needs. So thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.